cold night in Paris, a man whose name was Robert Langdon was sleeping rather poorly. He woke up again that night for the third time. Annoyed, he tilted his head over to the alarm clock on his bedside table, 12:32 a.m. On his bedstand, he saw a paper that said, "The American University of Paris." He did not like this, but somebody was at his door. Annoyed, he got up and opened the door, just stood with the chain on. It was the police. Surprisingly, they actually wanted his help for something. The police officers slid a photograph through the door and gave it to Langdon. He immediately felt a sinking feeling looking at it. It was confusing and a bit hard to see in the darkness of the room. He could make out that it was a photo of a corpse in the Vatican. This sent him into a flashback of when somebody tried to kill him in the Vatican. Presently there are 5 people: Cilias, 3 senechals, a grandmaster, and a pupil, in addition to a map and what is known as a keystone. A keystone is a block at the top of a stone archway that connects the 2 sides. Apparently one of the men, named Cilias, had 4 victims try to tell him where they hid the keystone. According to them, they hid it in Paris's old churches, such as the Église de Saint-Sulpice, before they died. The teacher freaked out because they were in the Lord's house. He then realized that he needed the keystone expeditiously. The teacher wanted Cilias to go to all the churches, even with all their security and protection. He convinced himself they would be forgiven for his actions, because others had done worse. The book states that he felt in the center of the room and took all his clothes off. The book doesn't state that the other people left the room, meaning that everybody saw him without clothes on. Yes, that is actually in the book. Anyways, around his thigh was a spiked strap that pierced his thigh, causing him to bleed. Apparently all true followers had to wear this. He then beat himself with a rope covered in dried blood until he himself bled. Changing topics, Langdon and the agent discussed about the Eiffel Tower while they were driving to a museum. When they arrived, they sat there discussing the plan to break into the building. Now this is no ordinary building or museum. It was probably one of, if not the biggest museum in the world, with over 65,000 pieces of art. As they combed over the architecture, they saw a large pyramid. Apparently the designer had a pharaoh complex. However, Langdon thought low of his ability to speak French, which he thought would jeopardize the mission because they were in France. When Langdon stepped out of the car, the agent just drove off, leaving him there. He was there to meet a police officer nicknamed Bull. He was not happy over the fact that he had not only been left by the officer, but also at the time, he had only been awake for 20 minutes. Langdon had walked up the stairs to the museum. He was greeted by a very tall man who was named Fash, and he did actually just let him in. Fache led Langdon through the spacious hallways, corridors, and wings of the Louvre Museum, up escalators into an elevator. Langdon resisted getting into the elevator because when he was younger, he had fallen into a well and was stuck for hours. This gave him what is known as claustrophobia, or the fear of tight spaces. After a bit of convincing, the tall man managed to get Langdon to come into the elevator. He did not have a good time in there, silently freaking out and panicking. At a different place, a man named Manuel Maringarosa was preparing to go out. He was a high-level bishop with his black robe and purple stripe to show his importance and rank. However, he didn't want others to know that he was a high-level bishop, so he did not wear his purple stripe. Back at the figure in Langdon, they came across a large gate. Dang, this thing is big. Could probably stop a tank, Langdon thought. Cilias was about to hang himself. He stopped before he actually did it and cleaned up. Langdon, uncomfortable, stepped out of the elevator, but he noticed the strange interior of the room that he stepped into. Under the baseboards of the large room, there was a faint red glow, intermittently glowing on patches of the floor. Around the room, there were carbon scrubbers to remove air that people had breathed out. Yes, the paintings really needed that. And fake cameras strung about the ceiling borders. Fake cameras because simply installing real ones would be too expensive and impractical. So they were just there to scare possible intruders. Looking up, Langdon saw something he really did not expect. There, sitting on the ground, was a briefcase, just filled with cash. Above the money was a misplaced painting. Analyzing it, he estimated it to be around $2 million in cash. According to Foch, in his office, the curator was attacked. In a fleet of panic, he rushed into the Grand Gallery without thinking. This activated the security gate, which traps intruders rather than keeping them out. Still in a desperate fit of fear, he pulled the painting from the wall, for some reason. But this only trapped him in. The killer approached the gate, pointed his gun through the bars, and fired. Sonneray was hit in the stomach. He died not long after. Past the money was another statue, and yet something seemed off. Langdon and the figure walked past it, and to their horror, they saw him. The curator was on the ground in a snow angel position, dead, with a 5-pointed star painted with blood on his chest centered on the Sonneray navel, called a pentacle. According to Foch, the symbol was supposed to represent yin and yang, when the masculine and the feminine were balanced. The pentacle was the female symbol. It represented Venus, god of love and beauty. The Olympics used to have it as their logo before they changed it, when the meaning changed. It really didn't have anything to do with Satan. Quite the opposite. It was a symbol in pagan faith. However, the leaders of the Christian church wanted people to believe in Christianity, not paganism. So the church led a smear campaign against the pagan faith in the area. Near the corpse, there was a table already set up with different forensic tools, one of which was a black light. Langdon grabbed this and shined it onto the dead body. Illuminated in purple, he saw a strange message, called Amanisseur. All of this was being captured on camera by a man on a security panel, just watching. This man was named Lieutenant Collett. On the second floor, in a small room at a church, an elderly woman in her 60s, named Sister Sandrine, woke up to a phone call from a man named the Abbey. He wanted to tell her something. Allegedly, Opus Dei transferred over $1 billion to the Vatican Bank to speed up the process of canonization, from a century down to only 20 years. One of the Abbey's numeraries was in Paris, and on their way to the church at an estimated time of 1 o'clock or 20 minutes from then. The Abbey also revealed that at Opus Dei, women were treated horribly. They were forced to sleep on concrete, clean the men's living quarters for no pay, so basically slavery, and were forced into more tasks than the men for simply being a woman, which is out of their control. The reason Opus Dei had for this was because Eve was the one who picked the fruit of all knowledge back in the Garden of Eden, thousands of years ago. So Opus Dei was punishing all women for something one woman did a long time ago. After Opus Dei was confronted about this information, they doubled down, threatening to make the situation even worse just for being questioned. Back at the museum, as Langdon inspected the body, he deciphered a message on his chest which read 13-3-2-21-11850. Oh, draconian devil, oh, lame saint. Inspecting the body standing up, Langdon saw something he did not expect. As he shined the light across the whole body, he made out what is known as the Vitruvian Man, Leonardo da Vinci's most famous drawing, representing male and female harmony. However, Da Vinci was known for religious hypocrisy, claiming things to be what he believed, but then producing art or other symbols that included pagan messages and symbols, things that were contradictory to Christian beliefs he claimed to possess. He did this for money from the commissions rather than true faith. As Lieutenant Collett listened into the conversations of Langdon and Foch, he remembered Foch's statements about pedophilia in the Catholic Church. He believed that all priests who committed those acts should be hanged. Foch got a call from one of his agents. He'd uploaded many pictures of the scene to the cryptography database of the DCPJ, hoping somebody could solve it. However, Foch didn't like the state of the DCPJ because they had put forth efforts to actively employ more women. This is because he believed that all women would be less capable than their male counterparts. Specifically, he didn't like Agent Navarro. To make his perception of her worse, she interrupted his conversation with Langdon by that very phone call. and when Foch hung up, she ran into the gallery despite Foch explicitly telling her not to. Nuevu told Langdon that he needed to contact the U.S. Embassy. When she was going to tell Foch about the news she'd gathered about the findings of the symbols on the curator, she saw that there was also news for Langdon. Nuevu offered her phone to Langdon, but Foch blocked the offer and handed Langdon his phone instead. He took the girl aside to angrily reprimand her for disobeying his orders. Langdon was connected to a voicemail. He was confused. Before the girl signaled to him to use the other paper that she handed him. 454. This also connected him to a recording, but this one was different. It told him that he was in immediate danger. He needed to listen closely. Celia sat in a car outside the St. Sulpice, just imagining how powerful Opus Dei would become if they got their hands on the keystone, because a rock somehow has that much power. When he was only 7 years old, he became an orphan. His father, who worked as a dock worker, would often come home drunk. He was a wife-beater. On one of his crash-outs, he beat his wife so badly that she didn't wake up. Celia stood over it, feeling very guilty for doing nothing. This is often the case when children witness the instability of their household from a young age, blaming themselves for things out of their control. Celias grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen and impaled his father in the back until he fell silent. Celias left the apartment for the streets of Marsilias. After wandering the streets, he sought refuge in the basement of an abandoned factory, with no other option than to steal food to survive. He taught himself to read with the magazines he found on the trash. A girl twice his age, so 24, tried to steal food from him, and was on the line of life and death, almost pummeled to death before he was stopped by officers. When Celias was 18, he was promptly caught attempting to steal food from a ship. The two highly intoxicated men that caught him beat him. The combination of violence and alcohol reminded Celias of his abusive father. He nearly killed the two men before two officers showed up to arrest him. In jail, he woke up on a horrible bed before just flopping onto the ground. Right when he landed on the ground, a boulder came crashing down through the ceiling and landing on his bed, leaving a large dent. When he crawled up through this hole, he came into a large tunnel. He wandered these tunnels for a while, before in his exhausted state, he didn't see he was wandering off the edge of a balcony, before it was too late when he slipped off. He tumbled down the mountain, brutally beaten by the rough mountain terrain, at least until he came to a stop at a train track. A boxcar loomed overhead, and he crawled in. He awoke on the cold concrete floors of the prison by the sounds of a man wailing in pain. He quickly ran down the halls to the source. In the kitchen, a large man was beating a smaller one. He full-on football tackled the bigger one, who then ran. He then set the smaller one, who was a priest named Manuel Angrigosa, on the couch, which for some reason is in a kitchen. Celias woke up again, looking at the crucifix above his bed. Seeing a newspaper on his bed, he decided to read it. A large earthquake happened at the prison he was just at, releasing many dangerous inmates. A priest came into the room, handing him a Bible, and encouraged him to read in Acts 16. When he reached verse 26, he found something summarized with, "A man named Celias was laying in his cell, beaten by guards. Then an earthquake hit, destroying the prison, and many were let loose." This was almost identical to what he had experienced, so the priest decided to start calling him Celias. Celias decided this was a good name. The priest then gave him breakfast.